Hello and welcome to Voices from L5. Today we got Hannah Kerner of the Space Frontier Foundation. She's going to be here talking a little bit about companies in space and what her organization does to connect entrepreneurs with other folks who can help them realize their dreams in space, as well as a couple other things along the way. If you guys enjoy it and you're looking forward to more Voices from L5, check out our new Facebook page. That's www.facebook.com/Voices from L5. We're also on Twitter, and if you guys want to support the show, check us out on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Voices from L5, or just to go to voicesfroml5.com. Don't forget to leave a nice comment on iTunes, vote us 5, or whatever you need to do to let everyone know that you like our show.
The act of moving onward means we pass these signposts. One of them was first leaving Earth. The next one is hanging out on the moon. What's next? The planets. Onward to the edge. We're moving onward to the edge. Here we are together. This fragile little world. This fragile little world. Onward to the edge. We're moving onward to the edge. Here we are together. This fragile little world.
So Space Frontier Foundation is a nonprofit that was founded in 1988, and we kind of function like a chamber of commerce for the private space industry. So compared to many national space nonprofits, we are not a membership organization. We serve the industry and specifically all of the companies, both current, future, past even, in the commercial space industry. So the Space Frontier Foundation seeks to eventually enable human settlement of space in a way that is both sustainable and accessible. And this sustainable and accessible requirement is why we are working to cultivate the private space industry to make it robust and self-sustaining. Mm-hmm. It's not about giving billionaires a new hobby. It's about creating a better life for humans on our planet and other planets and expanding our minds and reach.
Just to begin with that's a really interesting, I guess, mission statement, given that right now, when I talk to a lot of people who are involved in this new space industry, a lot of the concern is there for, how you put it, giving billionaires a new hobby. With the exception of Elon Musk, who is, probably insane enough to believe everything he says, a lot of people that I speak to are sort of concerned that a lot of these people who are playing in space are mostly here to either get quick profits or to, just sort of see how this thing plays out rather than actually have a genuine interest or dedication to the field of space science. Myself included, the concern for me is there, but it's interesting that you use this terminology of trying to cultivate a sustainable growth. I think that's definitely a very positive foot to jump off on.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a concern from our perspective when we look at the needs of the industry right now. Mm-hmm. That we do feel that it's kind of in danger at this point of seeming kind of not just gimmicky but out of reach to the average citizen. Mm-hmm. And even though, like, in some ways seeing these tech giants become players in the industry and maybe even seeing them go to space soon kind of helps bring it back to earth, or bring it down to earth for people, because they, when they see the Amazon CEO doing things in space, it kind of makes it more real to them because they use Amazon Prime, right? But it also really puts it out as something that is not for them, right? It makes it as something that's only for rich people, or something that is not inherently for improving human life. And I think in addition to that, a lot of the messaging around space right now, especially with climate change, is like, oh, this planet's not going to last much longer. Let's go to a new one. And we're not about that, right? Like, herein lies the Space Frontier Foundation's role with messaging, and an important role that nonprofits play, I think, is messaging to the public and to other industries, because it's not really any individual company's role to target the messaging for the entire industry.
Right.
So we work to educate other industries and the public about the role space plays in Earth, And it's really a symbiotic relationship, right? Both in the technology and the space science research, everything is so symbiotic. So many I mean, I like my favorite example, when I'm talking to people like my parents, right, who don't know anything about space or why it's important, is that we discovered the greenhouse effect and that our planet was changing from um, anthropogenic emissions because of looking at Venus,
Mm.
right? We saw on Venus this runaway greenhouse effect and then looked at Earth and we thought, oh, maybe this is happening here. And then, that this entire climate change movement was launched. And that message is really lost. And I think it's our role to communicate to people why it's important that we have a place in space that's active and sustainable.
That's it's definitely a refreshing viewpoint. I want to commend you for the eschewing of the that thought process of we need to leave Earth now. I have had one or two people on the show who share that, but I think most of the people who come on here are eager to set up those space settlements mostly to escape the dreaded horror that the Earth's going to be soon. But I think you're right. Ultimately, the focus should be on using space to better life for everyone, including, generally to try to improve and help Earth's current situation. And there's many different paths to doing this. And I guess it's always been a personal interest of mine of trying to use free enterprise and businesses to achieve that goal. Longtime listeners to the show will know that I'm not someone who necessarily believes in that concept, but I'm always fascinated by attempts to do it, and also I'm always eager to learn more about how that's intended to be. So, it's really nice having you on to sort of talk about that a little bit. I want to jump back into what the Space Frontier Foundation is a little bit. You guys have done some really, really incredible things in the past. You guys have some really incredible projects, and I'd like you to talk about that a little bit. Tell our listeners a little bit about some of these big things that you've done.
Yeah, so I think there were kind of two phases of the Space Frontier Foundation, where maybe there's 1988 to about 5 years ago, maybe, and there's our sort of current phase, which is maybe the past 5 years and now, and what we are working on for the future, because this is kind of also where we saw a change in the commercial space industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you think back 5 years ago or a little bit beyond 5 years ago, there was not much of a private space industry,
Right.
right? We had the big government contractor giants, which is great. It's a step, right? But the idea of real free market and competition um, was just not there. And so this first phase of the Space Frontier Foundation, I think, it's more of an advocacy and kind of education and political action
Mm-hmm.
group, where our founder Rick Tomlinson testified to Congress many times. We were involved with the Mir space station when it was targeted to be Mir Corp, and then NASA did not like that, to say the least. But so really, in the past, it was kind of a call to action. Our group was to say there is another way. There's another way to do this, and there's no way we can have a sustainable and accessible space program that is run by a government, right? Sustainable maybe, but probably not, because if there's no competition, things are exorbitantly expensive and innovation is very slow. Um, and the accessible part is, it's only for Americans, right? And that's not okay to us either. This is about the entire human race, not just our country. And I think in the past 5 years, we've kind of gotten almost what we've been um, advocating for all those years. The industry has really transitioned to people now saying, yeah, it definitely makes sense to have a private space industry. That's great. People are very excited about all of these new companies, but it is a very fragile ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Our private space industry is right now, and so we've really transitioned to being less of an advocacy group and more of an enablement group. And so now we focus more on directly cultivating this community, facilitating cross industry relationships, increasing public engagement, and really directly helping these small companies that are coming up to find investment, and not just find investment and then run out of money,
Mm-hmm.
but to have really sustainable businesses and a strong economy around this, and we're working with investors to educate them about the industry and help them find the right investments for their firms.
Right.
We're working with other industries to help them see how they can fit into this, and how we can create partnerships between these companies that really make sense, but space has been so walled off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really kind of doing more research to see what is needed in the industry right now, helping companies see where their niche might be, rather than just taking the sort of popular road at the
Mm-hmm.
time, which right now might be Earth observing CubeSats, right?
Right.
Helping them see like, okay, let's not make this a fad. We want this to sustain itself and to grow. And it's a very complex ecosystem.
Right. Right. And as you said, very fragile.
Yes.
I hate to keep doubling back onto things you said halfway through what you were saying, but something that you said really, really interested me. The part about how using free enterprise and the private sector as a way to enable more citizens of Earth to get involved in space is
Mm-hmm.
not something that I've heard anyone talk about in the private sector before, and it's something that speaks to me directly. As someone who isn't an American citizen. I'm here as a permanent resident, and with that, I cannot work for NASA or any other government
Mm-hmm.
agency,
Mm-hmm.
despite how much I might like to. And there was a moment when I was watching The Martian recently, where I was you've probably seen The Martian, I assume, and I
Yes.
assume anyone
Yes.
listening has. It's really hard not to get this sense of incredible like desire to rush home and send off your resume as soon as possible. Somewhere throughout that movie, there's just a moment where I think everyone who watches it and it resonates with thinks, "Well, I know where I'm working next." And the same thing happened to me, but followed immediately by this crushing disappointment that, oh wait, they're not going to hire me. I'm not a citizen. Um, and at the time, the idea of the private sector did occur to me, in that sort of fantasy that I had where I'm working in the space industry. Um, but it still felt to me as a little unobtainable. I think we talked about this just a little bit earlier, where you were talking about how seeing billionaires in space has this sort of double-edged issue to it, where it makes it seem more attainable, more real, but at the same time less attainable for the average person. And I wonder if that's where that sort of feeling comes from for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that was kind of the first thing that convinced me to join forces, if you will, with the private space industry. I mean, all through college, like as soon as I got out of high school until I finished college, I was interning for NASA.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was in computer science, which has many, many international students, and I would tell them about it, and they were super excited.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, like you, they come to find out, oh, I'm automatically not qualified,
Right.
right? And that sucks, And at the time, I didn't really have a solution for them, right? I'm
Right.
just like, well, maybe you can create your own project. You There's what are you gonna do,
Like
right?
your options really boil down to either you become nationalized, which is an expensive and time-consuming process
Yeah,
for a job that you may
you might
not
as
get
well
anyway.
for yeah, exactly. You might as well wait for the industry to come up, right?
Right.
And then kind of towards the end of college, this I was getting involved with Space Frontier Foundation, and all of these companies were pretty new. It
Mm-hmm.
was still like I don't even think they were hiring interns, like when at that time. But then um all of a sudden it just kind of took off. And I remember then I went to work at Planet Labs when we were about 40 people. Planet Labs is a remote sensing, well, not startup anymore, but which is cool, but remote sensing company that builds constellations for high cadency Earth imaging.
Mm-hmm.
And so there, they, even for interns, would go through the ITAR um, process to allow them to work on technical projects.
Mm.
Um, like somebody would be there 3 months, and it would probably take a month and a half at least to get their clearance. But they still did it because they truly believed that their company would be better and their products would be better
Mm.
if they had a more diverse workforce. And I think that was very true. And they continued to see the results from that and continued to make it part of um, their team selection.
Mm-hmm.
And NASA's really missing out on that. But then I it was awesome to be able, when I was involved with SEDS, the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, I was the national chair for 2 years, to be able to tell all of these students, you do have opportunities
Mm-hmm.
now, and so many of these companies then were coming online and wanting to hire young people and willing to hire international students. Um, that finally they did have a way to participate. And it's not NASA's fault, but
Sure.
that is one important reason to have a private industry, is because it enables them to make their own decisions and to allow a diverse workforce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. There is this untapped amount of brain power in the international field. I mean, unless you're lucky enough to be born American or born Russian or born Indian just now,
Yeah.
or born in China just now, you have basically zero chance of being involved in space except for these private companies. We just recently, the last episode out, which is going out today, but for anyone listening now, will have gone out 2 weeks ago, was with two people in the Indian University for Space and Technology, who both sort of had similar laments about how the Indian private sector isn't powerful enough yet to sustain any sort of international involvement in it. They're just these very, very small companies that have to rely on, whoever founded them primarily to run them. And some of this boils down to how India's laws work and how their restrictions on private enterprise exist. But they had similar concerns that we're talking about here, that there's this massive amount of brain power that they could be importing from countries around it that it's just not able to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that I think a lot of the world is seeing right now.
Yeah, I think what also helped with this is that I think it was in the past year, CubeSats were reclassified to be under, I guess, like the commerce version of ITAR or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the actual legislation for it, but CubeSats were no longer considered like projectile weapons like other satellites, right?
Right.
Um, and so a lot of these companies who are working on things, that made it a lot easier for them in the past year or so to hire international people. And I think another thing about these private companies is that they, having learned from the tech industry, or having taken a line from the tech industry on this, that they're much more interested in empowering young people than more traditional commercial companies or government organizations for space
Mm-hmm.
are. Um,
Yeah, I mean, even some of the older folks that we speak to who are at NASA are also talking about how terrible it is that NASA just doesn't, like you say, empower younger people. They're sort of stuck in this situation where a lot of their smartest and best engineers are so close to retirement that once they're gone, we're going to be in a pretty dire situation where trying to replace them is going to be downright impossible or so time consuming that it's going to set the projects back quite a lot.
Absolutely. I wrote an op-ed about this in the past year for via satellite because I had gone to the satellite conference and their whole thing that year, and I think it was 2015, was like, oh no, our industry, like our workforce is literally dying. They are all getting very old. And where are the young people? No young people want to come work in the satellite industry. And I was telling them, like it's not enough that space is cool,
Mm-hmm.
right? People think when they're hiring, I think at NASA that people are just flocking to them and that like the best and the brightest are definitely applying. And I'm here telling them, they're definitely not anymore. Not only do they not realize that they can work for you
Mm-hmm.
because you don't recruit at all, right? Coming from a computer science department, I didn't have to buy food ever. People were recruiting so much,
Mm-hmm.
right? Facebook is there, Google, Amazon, every single tech company, every single day. It's like you've got lunch, dinner, t-shirts, whatever, they're in your face.
Mm-hmm.
And none of these students who are brilliant are thinking about going to NASA or certainly not, any of these blank sat companies,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like they're definitely not thinking about that. And they think like, oh, we don't need to change this tech, this like cool tech workplace thing is a fad. And I'm telling them like, you keep thinking that you're gonna keep missing these very smart young people, and they're not going to go work for you when they then have to sit in an office and move extremely slowly
Mm-hmm.
on projects under 10 project managers and 2 engineers.
Right.
You have to change, like, or your workforce is going to literally die.
Let's roll this back to you and your involvement in the SFF real quick. You are I believe this is still true, but you're the project manager on the New Space Conference project that the SFF is involved in. Is that correct?
No, I'm the executive director now, so we have another woman who is the project manager for the conference. Her name is Kat Kovastova.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
I do want to talk about the conference a little bit though. It's
Sure,
probably
yeah.
the most, if anyone has heard about you guys who are listening to this, that's probably one of the areas that I think most people have heard about. It's a pretty big event. I see it all the time whenever it comes up on whenever it's going to happen. Coming up on my Twitter feed at least. Um, let's talk a little bit about it. It is fundamentally, from what I understand, a place for new space people to come together, meet, and sort of like you were saying, recruit new talent into it, learn about new ideas, and exchange information and generally network. What makes the New Space conference?
Yeah, so we are the oldest and I guess longest running conference that focuses purely on the private space sector. Um, and we, I believe, are the only conference that focuses on what we kind of call the three pillars of private space exploration, which is entrepreneurship, investment, and tech.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of like to think of it as we're planning to hold ourselves true to what we're doing as a tech conference. Because we believe that a lot of innovation in space is stagnated because of a lack of cross industry partnerships and cross pollination with other technologies. And so we really bring in people from not just space, not the usual suspects, when you go to a space conference and you're like, yep, here's everyone I know. We really try to breed new ideas and new partnerships, not just for deal flow, but for something new where we're doing an investor concierge service where we're helping um, investors to directly meet with all of the little companies that are there and helping all of those companies coming to the conference to find investors who might be interested depending on what stage of investment they're looking for. We're bringing a lot more people from the tech industry to participate and speak than ever before. We've got folks from Microsoft, from HP, from Google, from Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
really trying to get people thinking outside of the space mindset and thinking in more global terms, both literally and um, logically.
Mm-hmm. It's really nice to see this sort of attitude take hold so much recently. I think that you're right. It started around 5 years ago when the new space movement really started to take hold and all these companies started to evolve. But you see this also in a lot of the people I've spoke to from government space agencies like the BIS and the and NASA. All of
Mm-hmm.
them starting to realize a little bit more that this cross you know, these cross industry methods of working are really the key to the future of space. It's no longer just about folks who are really good at space stuff. You need those tech companies involved. You need everyone, not just those very specific disciplines. Part of that, a hopeful part of me likes to think that's because space is becoming more and more this normal thing that we need everyone involved in, not just very specific, very specialized folks.
Mm-hmm. I think that's part of it. And I also think the progression of the consumer electronics industry has really played a role in demonstrating that need, but also demonstrating that they are much more similar to us than we might have thought
Mm-hmm.
before. So I think when the little CubeSat movement started, right? People were with phone sat and stuff. They're like, oh, it's small. Like this is very powerful. We can put it on our spacecraft, and it's more powerful than Apollo, which it is. But in addition to that, now um, with Apple, for instance, trying to get their uh, per billion errors down in their phones, they're kind of having to deal with now the same problems that we are. So now to reduce their mean failures, they're having to deal with cosmic ray
Mm-hmm.
bit flips and things, right? Um, and so those are the same problems we're solving in space. And really, like, I think the iPhone processor is more rad tolerant than or radiation tolerant than a lot of our sort of approved like NASA condoned space processors. And there's this disconnect still between the space technology industry and the technology industry
Mm-hmm.
or the consumer technology industry that they kind of think that they're still different, but they're not. And so we really want to see um, not just sharing of technology, but working on it together and coming up with ideas to solutions for problems that everyone is facing.
Right, right. I think a lot of people on both sides of the new space debate would agree with you there that NASA and government agencies especially they need to start getting more and more involved in allowing other industries to be involved and work with them in ways that they maybe aren't considering because of their um, I guess biases and prejudices that come with working in the same industry for so long. I think a lot of it comes down to that old problem that we were talking about, where a great deal of their engineers and best and brightest are getting on a little bit, and
Yeah.
getting that they're not having the same sort of innovative ideas and thoughts that younger folks will.
Yeah, that's very true.
So where does where's the SFF going these days? What's coming up for them? What's in the future project pipeline?
So we're kind of I guess I can talk about a couple different projects, vaguely.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have our new Space Venture Labs project that I've mentioned a little bit briefly, though not by name. With some of that being the investor concierge service at the New Space Conference, but also we're kind of building up a, I guess, a virtual accelerator. Um, of working with these new companies that want to get involved in the space industry or utilize space either as a destination or a resource,
Mm-hmm.
and helping them to, often I think we're seeing these companies that have good ideas, but they're not quite pitch ready,
Mm-hmm.
right? They kind of need some help before they go speak to investors.
Right.
Um, and so we are helping these companies to find the right mentors, find the right maybe board of directors for them, help them do their due diligence both in technology and finance and marketing,
Mm-hmm.
um, before, and then helping them, set up meetings with investors that might be interested in what they're doing, not just at the conference, but on a year-to-year cadence. And we have some other kind of things coming up with that in the future that people will start to see online. And that project is New Space Venture Labs again. And also doing a lot of thought leadership around that of research, like I mentioned, white papers, things of this nature, for educating people and doing analysis on the economics of the industry and where we see it going and where we see its needs are.
Right.
And then we've been pretty active in the past with policy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I said earlier, I think that was kind of the bulk of what we did initially. And now, rather than being kind of a general advocacy group when it comes to policy, we are looking to move more towards targeted action, where rather than on some cadence going to Capitol Hill and telling people what we want and that the private industry is great, we're looking more to find specific legislative goals that we can work to reach. These rising tides float all the boats kind of action items, for the industry.
Right, right. I think you guys came to specifically you came to the show via our the friend of the show Tom Mayada, who obviously does his March Storm work and that sort of thing. Is that the kind of policy work that you're talking about there? The similar stuff to March Storm?
Yeah, so March Storm is a project of the Space Frontier Foundation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we are also a part of Alliance for Space Development, but March Storm is a project of SFF, and that is one of our goals. That's I think it's a different approach than what I'm talking about here of what we'll be going after, but March Storm is more of citizen action,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is a very important aspect as well, because Congress people listen when big groups of Americans are saying they want something, right?
Right.
And I think it's also really important for us to get diverse groups of people out to things like that, right? Because I think it's very easy for the message to be received differently when they feel like they've got a tinfoil hat kind of person telling them that space is cool, and when they have like maybe other people that they wouldn't have thought are involved in this, right? It kind of
Mm-hmm.
helps them get out of the way they think about the industry too.
Right.
And it was funny. I did March Storm last year. This year I couldn't make it, but I in many of the offices. This was when we were first trying to get the SEDS Act introduced, which now has been introduced, uh, and that was to amend NASA's objectives to include settlement,
Mm-hmm.
and development of space as a clear objective. And the number of staffers that looked at me and said, "By settlement, you mean what do you mean?" The idea of living in space was just so foreign to them. and no fault of theirs,
Right.
right? Um, but they just totally don't see it as something that's realistic.
Right.
But when you look at things like Mars One, you see that it's almost the only thing that people feel like they can participate in,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everyone can identify with living somewhere.
Right.
And I think it's very important that we continue to push that message and recognize that it's really the only thing that unanimously gets people excited about space.
Right, right. And I mean, it's always been something I've admired about Marchdom is that every time anyone talks about it, that one goal is pretty much always on the goal sheet for Marchdom, getting someone somewhere to acknowledge space settlement as the mission of NASA. It's something that I hope you guys keep doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that's very dear to the Space Frontier Foundation and something we'll continue to work on and continue to ramp up our efforts on is commercial utilization of the International Space Station and private space stations. So I'm really excited for Bigelow's module in the next couple weeks
Mm-hmm.
to be sent up. And I love that a private space company is sending up an ISS module on a private launch vehicle.
It's certainly an exciting time.
Yeah.
That's about time for us. Is there anything else you'd like to go over before we cut off?
I think that's great. Just I'd love for people to come to New Space and talk to us about what they're doing and what we're doing and how we can work together to enable human settlement.
Great. Well, you've been a fantastic guest, Hannah. A really interesting conversation, and you've raised a lot of really, really good points that I think a lot of the other new space capitalism people have not touched upon in my conversations with you. Thanks for being on the show, and I hope we can get you to be on again sometime.
Thanks for having me.
Hey folks, hope you enjoyed the episode. Big shout out to John Boswell of Symphony of Science for making the music that you're currently listening to. Check him out at symphonyofscience.com. And a huge shout out to Nick LaCrome, our $10 Patreon. If you want to support the show, you want to make sure we get really great guests, and you want to make sure we have all the equipment we need, and get a little something for yourself in the form of early episodes, monthly hangouts, and all kinds of crazy stuff, go to www.patreon.com/voices from L5 or follow the link below in the box accompanying this website. Or if you just want to know a little bit about the show, go to Twitter and check us out at Voices from L5. One big shout out to the NSS. We are now an NSS sponsored podcast. Go to nss.org to learn more about this fantastic organization, one of the biggest civilian space organizations in the world, and also probably the biggest push for space settlement that exists. That's www.nss.org.